Hello, hello, hello. Anya Keister here. For today's video, we are going to talk about horror literature, horror reading, and my favorite horror series. But before we get into that, let's do a little bit of background. So for those of you who may have watched some of my previous videos, I talk a lot about how growing up I loved the supernatural. Oh my gosh, as a child, I would go to the library. My mom had a habit of once a week we would go to the two or three major libraries in my neighborhood, in my region, and we would go and we would collect a bunch of books. When I was a kid, I wasn't reading spooky things or anything like that, but as soon as it got to the point where I got my own library card, I was checking out all of the books about ghosts and spirits and witches and monsters. I went through a phase where I was obsessed with the Loch Ness Monster. I thought I was a ghost hunter as a kid. All of that kind of stuff. Anything having to do with the supernatural, I was into. So pretty quickly, I got into horror. Now, for a little while, I wasn't actually allowed to do some horror because as a child, I was probably like 7 or something, I watched the first Puppet Master movie, and I had really bad nightmares, and I woke up my parents like the entire night because I swore there was a puppet somewhere in my room that was trying to set me on fire, and I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies for an entire year as a kid. But they were more okay with me reading horror stories because they really wanted to nurture my love of reading as a kid. So I know on like multiple family trips and car rides, they would stop to go look at, like mountains and caverns and sightsee, and I would just sit in the back of the car and I would read Stephen King. I was reading Goosebumps around like 5th grade. By 6th grade, I was reading Fear Street. I was really into the Bruce Coville series. Oh my gosh, all those are amazing, and it still includes one of my favorite horror stories of all time that's like 1 page long. I love it so much. I'll post the information on this side. I'll post the information like right here so you can look up the story because it is chef kiss. So good. So basically, I just became obsessed with reading horror and scary stories and things like that. Now, as I got a little bit older, I got a little more serious, which is like not a great way of saying that I stopped reading horror and I started reading more like plays and poetry and drama, and I got into documentaries and biographies and nonfiction and stuff like that. But the horror never left. It just kind of mutated in a sense, which leads me to kind of how I currently feel about a lot of horror. I still love suspenseful, jump scare, supernatural stuff a lot. I watch that a lot in horror movies, but I'd say my love goes into that more kind of self-aware, meta humor, comedy kind of genre, which is where my favorite book series comes in. And that book series is the John Dies at the End series. So I have the original John Dies at the End here, and the second one, which is This Book is Full of Spiders. There is a third one, which is What the Hell Did I Just Read? Which I have not actually read yet, and I'm very excited. I think I'm going to go pick it up this Halloween season. But let's talk a little bit about this series. So, starting around, I want to say 2007, I'll put the correct data from, it's on the side this time. I'll put the correct data if it wasn't. Around 2007, David Wong, which is a pen name for the actual writer's name is Jason Pargin, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He is one of I think he might be like the head editor, or he's one of the editors at Cracked.com. And so he started this series online where it was kind of like a web serial book writing. That's not when I started to read it, but it did have a lot of followers there. And if you actually go to the end of the book, you can see there's kind of like these pages here where dedicated fans who were reading all those times. So yeah, it was a web serial kind of online series where you could read it for free. That's where my wife actually started reading it, and that's eventually how I got to the series. But so David Wong, I'm just going to refer to him by his pen name because it's easier to remember. David Wong was writing this series, and he tried to get it published, and he couldn't, and just no one was picking it up. And he almost gave up on it, but then Permuted Press, which is a smaller book publisher, said that they would do it. and it came out as a manuscript and eventually came out as a book. It was so successful that, like I said, it came with the second one. Both of these now are put out by different publishers, so they're much easier to get a hold of. This one came out then next, and the third one came out in 2017. Now, one of the things that I like about this as a horror series compared to just reading like Stephen King, oh god, I went through a huge Dean Koontz phase when I was like 16 and 17, and I tried to read through all the books. My mom and I would read through them together. But one of the things that I like about this is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a sort of meta horror. It's a little bit more self-aware. Like I said, he's one of the editors for Cracked.com, which is a comedy website. So these books fall into a little bit of like horror satire, similar, I'd say, to kind of like how the movie The Cabin in the Woods that came out by Whedon a little while ago falls into a thing where it's still scary. These books still pack some of the biggest horror that I've read, where I just felt really scared and uneasy and such suspense. But I think because they're trying to not be super serious, it actually makes it a little bit easier for me to enjoy them. These have a lot of jokes in them. But another thing that I really love about this series is that because there's humor behind it, they're not afraid to kind of break a fourth wall. These books are all from a first-person perspective, so you are reading as the character is telling you the story and is relaying it to you. So as you're reading, it takes away some of that omniscient presence that a lot of horror will go to, that I just actually breaks some of the realism for me. In this things, you can have something suddenly happen and it's never explained, but it makes sense because it's being told by the person who is experiencing it, and we as people don't know all the stuff that's going on all the time. But because of that, it actually makes it scarier, in my opinion, because you don't find out what happens. Things just happen, and that's how it is in real life. And to me, that is scarier than having all of the answers by the end of a book. The uneasiness of weird, random, strange stuff happening is what makes these books so great to me. I think they're both really good for very different reasons. John Dies at the End has a wonderful world building to it and great characters. You really get to know the characters super well in that. This book is full of spiders, has the same characters, and you're following along. It's a little bit more of a straightforward narrative, I would say, versus John Dies at the End, which has some amazing kind of twists and turns that are just great to read through, which this one doesn't. So straight horror, more like a straight comedy horror, a little bit more of an experimental one. And like I said, I haven't read the third one. I'm excited to pick it up and go read it. Another thing I should mention about it is that this series became popular enough that they actually made a movie that I want to say came out in 2011. I'll put the poster here. I saw the movie. We were really, my wife and I were really excited about it. Like I said, she introduced me to this series. I read her copies of it, I want to say. And then I think I just bought a copy for myself. The movie was good. This has a lot of material, and like I said, it has a lot of good twists and turns and things that just don't make sense. So I think the movie did a fairly good job of trying to explain what it could. It leaves out a major plot point, which I can understand why they left it out, but it's something that I loved about the series, so it kind of bummed me out that it wasn't in there anymore. But I'd say it's worth. I would say read the book and enjoy the book for what it is, and then go in watching the movie knowing that it's a slightly watered down version of what you would get in the book, but it's still really enjoyable. So I think it's personally worth a watch if you want to. It has a great cast. I mean, Paul Giamatti. That is what I have to say about these books. So if you haven't read them, get yourself a copy of John Dies at the End. Unfortunately, they took it off the internet for free reading when the publishers became big enough that they decided to not let people just read it for free anymore. But, it's not... I got my copy for like $15 in paperback, so I think it's totally worth it, and it's just delightful. It's really good comedy horror. I will give the heads up that you know, as I mentioned, this is an editor for Cracked.com, so some of the humor is a little more blue, as we say in the industry. It's a little bit, there's definitely some potty humor, there's definitely, like, some dick and fart jokes that you're gonna get in here. But, you know, I was okay with it. I didn't find any of it to be too horribly insulting. Granted, I haven't read these in a long time. But, you know, I didn't find anything too horrible about them or anything too egregious or anything that would need a content warning. So for a timeline, John dies at the end in 2007. This book is full of spiders in 2012. Now, he did have a third one that wasn't part of the series. It's just a sci-fi, kind of a futuristic sci-fi dystopia one that I'm working through, which came out in 2015, which is called Futuristic Violence in Fancy Suits. I have that on an audiobook that I'm working through. And then 2017 finishes the trilogy of the John Dies at the End series with What the Hell Did I Just Read? So check them out. I thoroughly recommend them as just a really nice comedy horror that is actually kind of scary. So if you're a person who doesn't necessarily like super gory or horrific or jump scares or suspense or can't handle horror reading, these are a great recommendation for you. That's going to be it for me today, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you go read the books, because they're very good. So do all the YouTube razzmatazz, like, subscribe, follow, all that kind of stuff. You can find more about me at AnyaKeister.com or on my Instagram at AnyaKeister. But that's going to be it, so I am going to hopefully get to a bookstore. I know of a Barnes & Noble here in Boulder that I can go pick up the copy so I can finish the trilogy this Halloween season. So I'm gonna go do that, and I'll see you around. Bye!